So President Obama begins a three-day trip to Alaska tomorrow to see for himself the effects of climate change. But he's already been accused of undermining his own agenda to tackle the problem by allowing an oil exploration project to go ahead in the Arctic. Well, the president will land in Anchorage and travel to the Alaskan towns of Seward and Dillium, all now feeling the impact of rising sea levels and land erosion.
This is all real. This is happening to our fellow Americans right now. In fact, Alaska's governor recently told me that 4 villages are in imminent danger and have to be relocated. Already rising sea levels are beginning to swallow one island community. Think about that. If another country threatened to wipe out an American town, we'd do everything in our power to protect ourselves. Climate change poses the same threat right now.
Well, according to NASA, average global temperatures have increased by nearly 1 degree since records began, and that small change appears to be having a huge impact. Currently, Arctic ice is declining at more than 13% a decade, with sea levels worldwide rising by an average of nearly 8 centimetres since 1992. Well, as far as Obama's concerned, the president will then fly north to Kotzebue, that's 33 miles above the Arctic Circle, and the northernmost journey of any American president that they've made whilst they're in office. An Inuit fishing village sits on the edge of Chukchi Sea, where Obama has just given the go-ahead to Shell to drill for oil offshore. He insists there's no contradiction between his climate and energy policies.
Now, even as we accelerate this transition, our economy still has to rely on oil and gas. And as long as that's the case, I believe we should rely more on domestic production than on foreign imports. And we should demand the highest safety standards in the industry.
Well, the Arctic Circle has the last great untapped reserves of oil and gas, containing up to 30% of the world's undiscovered gas and 13% of oil. Campaign groups are arguing that giving the green light to drilling risks a spill. And even if the exploratory wells are successful, the oil and gas bonanza could trigger catastrophic climate change. Well, Tom Burke is an environmental policy advisor.
Obama is going to Alaska because Alaska's in the front line of climate change, and it's where we're seeing the impacts of a changing climate on human beings really dramatically already right now, and he wants to draw attention to the fact that it's a climate changing now. So we're seeing coastal villages having to move because the absence of ice means that there is a lot of erosion of their shore. We're beginning to see changes in the pattern of fish moving as the temperatures of the water change. We're beginning to see animals affected, like walruses, for instance, 100,000 walruses on a beach in Alaska because they can't find any ice near enough. So we're beginning to see these quite dramatic changes, and that is a sign of what's to come in the rest of the world if we go on allowing the climate to change. Obama, in giving the go-ahead for Shell to drill in the Arctic, has clearly upset a lot of environmentalists and caused some people to doubt whether he's serious in his attempts to deal with climate change. I think the rest of the evidence suggests there's no question about his seriousness, his willingness to put himself out. But I think the expecting politicians in any area to be completely consistent is kind of pretty optimistic. What really matters is what is the overall direction of travel. And in that sense, Obama has been probably more clear than any other politician in the world.
Let's discuss all this then. Andrew Pendleton from the campaign group Friends of the Earth joins us from central London, and Simon Kent, managing editor of the website Breitbart London, is here with me in the studio in London. Simon, if I can come to you first, argue then, if you can, with President Obama. He's just as worried about these new figures or this new data that's come out.
He is indeed worried, but if he'd been to the Arctic 12 months ago, he would have heard that there have been 2 consecutive years of growth of the Arctic ice cap, so it wouldn't have made a very good backdrop for this announcement today. I think also when you look at drilling in the Arctic, yes, go ahead and drill because the world does need oil to function, but also Obama could approve the XL pipeline, Keystone pipeline from Calgary in Canada. Canadians have been trying for years to send oil by pipe down to the southern refineries in America, and Obama consistently says no. So he's trying to walk both sides of the street here, and as usual when a politician walks both sides of the street, no one gets happy.
Andrew Pendleton, Obama's data is out of date, so says Simon.
No, it's not, and some of the video you showed there from NASA, which was published last week, has gone viral. I mean, it seems to be being watched by everybody, and that's for very good reason, because it's particularly shocking, because it says unequivocally with very good measurement that over the long period of time, which is why we shouldn't judge any of these things over the period of 1 or 2 years, we're losing ice very, very fast, and a lot of that in Greenland, for instance, is ice that's based on land. So when that gets into the sea, that forces the level of the sea up, and that's the concern. For Obama, huge congratulations to him for doing this, but of course it would have been good for him to put to stop that drilling going ahead in the Arctic, because pretty much all of the coal, oil and gas that's new now, we have to leave in the ground. It's as simple as that.
And this new data, Andrew Pendleton, we were told not so long ago that there was a hiatus in global warming, a pause that we could be grateful for. What's the latest thinking on that?
There have been multiple pauses in the period of time that we've been measuring temperature data. So again, it's this point about not looking at climate change over a short period of time, but looking at it over a long period of time. That said, last year was the hottest year on record. This year, the climatologists are already saying is going to be breaking those records. So that pause may well be over. Too early to say, but may well be over. In which case, you know, we can look forward, if that's the right phrase, to seeing an acceleration in some of these problems. And you know, this is a very serious issue. It is so disappointing to hear people like Simon can continue to kind of undermine this, because it slows the process of taking this seriously and dealing with it in a way which causes the fewest people pain. And I think we just have to get on with that now. Simon,
can we get your position absolutely straight on this then? Are you saying there isn't climate change at all? There is no global warming?
No,
what
I'm
are
not
you saying?
That. I didn't say that. I hate to be misquoted. What I am saying that we're talking about observable science, and we say that looking back over history, but when we say history of measuring the climate, we're only talking about 130 years. That's all we're talking about. The Earth is, what, 4.5, 4.6 billion years old, and yet we're talking here and talking hypothetically where people are panicking and hyperventilating, and this is the end of the world, and the climate change will overwhelm us. And I think people should perhaps take a deep breath and just sit back a bit and realise that our observable science and what we've been able to observe is only 130 years old. And this week we had figures come out and they said this has been it's the hottest it's been since records began. Began 130 years ago.
The point here is that the science is increasingly robust, and it's the vast majority of serious climate scientists that are saying more or less the same thing. The big debate is about how much impact is that going to have, and the data from NASA last week suggests it could be worse actually than better. The fact is, this isn't the end of the world. It's not the apocalypse. It's very serious for humanity. That's the point, and we have to deal with this, because the tragedy is that people in the more marginal temperature areas of the world, the hotter places and the colder places, are the ones that are going to suffer first. People around the equator in countries in Africa, for instance, already suffering, and for their sake, as much as anything else, but for all of our sakes, for our children's sake, we need to get on with this now and stop having this debate about whether it's happening or not.
Simon, you might be right then. NASA's only using observable science going as far back as records began. But what about that point that we are in the here and now, and humanity has to deal with this, whether or not it's a blip in a short period of time, not looking at millions and millions of years, but just where we are now? We still have to face it.
Well, let's go to the starting point. I think the starting point should be that climate and weather has never been static since the Earth spun off from where it
No, but we're here now. How do we deal with it now?
Well, I think you'd have to get me to agree with the points being made here that we're in irreversible anthropogenic climate change. I don't accept that. I think it's the height of scientific conceit to say that humans are causing climate change. I'm not convinced of that. It gets back to my original point that climate is never static, that Earth has always been variable. Sometimes parts of the Earth have been hotter than they are now. Sometimes it's been colder. That's why we can drill for oil in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So we have to accept that.
Andrew?
It's Simon's absolute right to think whatever he wants to think. The thing is, what viewers for this programme must know is that the vast majority of proper climate scientists are now of a mind that this is a serious problem and one that we must deal with, because it's one that humanity is causing. You know, that never before has the climate changed over such a short period of time, and the only explanation we have for this is the coal, oil and gas, burning of coal, oil and gas, fossil fuels, and the emissions of that principally going into the atmosphere. We have to stop doing that, and we have to stop doing that in a way which is fair and which allows all of us to continue to lead a healthy and happy lives. And that, you know, the point here is that we're not talking about going back to the Stone Age. We're talking about deploying very simple technologies like wind and solar on a much greater scale to maintain a good quality of life for everyone while we deal with the problem that without dealing with, frankly, none of us can look forward to a good quality of life in the future.
Simon?
Well, can I just say this, that we have to deal with observable science, and I think we also should deal with the science. You say that a lot of scientists agree about climate change. Well, that means a lot of people can be wrong. Are these the same scientists in the 1970s who were telling us to prepare for a new ice age? Were telling us that the Earth was cooling and we had to be ready for that? Here we are 40 years hence, and now scientists are saying that in peer-reviewed science, the same peer-reviewed science in the 70s that said the world was getting cooler, now we're being told it's getting hotter and we should be prepared. Yes, humanity is important. You won't get any argument from me, but I also think science is important, getting it right is important, and there's a lot of lack of trust. And you talk about scientists agreeing and things. Well, as I said, that can only mean a lot of scientists can be wrong at exactly the same time.
Andrew?
I think the lack of trust is in politicians who take up the kind of position that Obama is taking, where on the one hand he is willing to take a leadership position, which, as I said at the beginning, is to be congratulated for. On the other hand, his policy doesn't line up with that. And over time, what we've got to do is to bring the policy and the action into line with the rhetoric of politicians. And all the evidence suggests that ordinary people like you and I, are already getting on with tackling climate change. What we need is more support from politicians and policy.
Let's talk then, if we can, Simon, more about what Obama's trying to do and the risk that drilling brings with it. We're talking about possible oil spillages. We've seen, of course, in the Gulf of Mexico that happening. We've seen irrevocable damage done to local wildlife, and environmental campaigners saying that the cost will be for decades to come. It is a risk, isn't it, for drilling to go ahead in the Arctic? Is it a risk worth taking?
Well, nothing in life comes without risk, does it? And Obama has talked about drilling. This is probably exploratory drilling. Obama still hasn't addressed the fact of how is he going to get this oil, if oil is found, from the Arctic down to the southern states of America where it can be refined. Will it be by ship? Will it be by pipeline? He hasn't addressed this. This is a president that's coming to the end of his term. This is a president who's looking to make some headland speeches to make his mark, whether it comes to climate, whether it comes to immigration in America, race relations in America. I see him as a fading president, desperately trying to position himself as some sort of key figure in American history. I don't think that's happening. And in Paris, don't forget, in December we have another meeting, the 21st meeting in a row from all around the world to talk about climate. Obama will be there trying to get a binding agreement, but to tell you the truth, having seen these operate before, these people will be flat out agreeing what day it is or what time it is, let alone trying to get a binding agreement.
Andrew, just one last word from you. The world does need greater energy reserves and a growing population, and the need for more fuel.
We can do this without coal, oil and gas in the future, so of course we need to use some of that stuff for a little while to come, but already some very credible calculations from the City of London suggest that in stock markets around the world we've got something like 5 times as much coal, oil and gas already invested in, that's in the ground, and gas companies or coal, oil and gas companies intend to get out, than we can ever burn if we're serious about tackling climate change. We're in the middle of the greatest battle I think humanity has ever seen between the science and where that is, between what the sort of future of humanity looks like, and this
Andrew Pendleton and Simon Ken, thank you both for your points of view. Thank you. You're watching Sky News. Still to come.